Hello.
How's it going, man? Good to see
Doing
you.
well. Good to see you, man. Good to see you.
Glad things worked out, don't
Yeah. I'm glad you came over. So, so are you?
We're still down the hill at the college. Yeah.
So you're sweet.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let me. Anywhere we can connect.
Yeah, we'd love to bring you back. Sweet. When was that? Was that in 2013?
Yeah, it's been 3 years. Yeah, almost 4. Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know what my position title was then, but I'm now the director of Tourism
Yeah,
Improvement.
that's what I was asking. Yeah. So when you were back then, you had another counterpart.
Yes, so I was director of implementation and co-director of the center with Darren. Yeah.
Yeah. That's it.
I'm glad things are working.
And hopefully this conversation will be a good one. Some questions answered. We can add some what you're thinking about things that maybe I'm not thinking.
Well, you're the expert here. I got to head out in 45 minutes to a meeting with college presidents.
Okay. Yeah, well, let me make sure you get the handout for today's session. So,
Sweet. You been in contact with Carrie recently?
every so often I see your Facebook posts, and so that's how we communicate. But I have to talk to her.
Good to see you. Good luck here.
Thank you.
Bear.
Are you ready? Yes, I think so.
You got enough steam left?
Yeah. No, this is where I get stoked. This is where I get stoked. I'll tell.
I understand. So, hi, I just have to say this because we talked earlier this week. So, being a public speaking teacher, I know how important good audience is.
Yes.
So, I'm not feeling if I get up, just, I don't want you to think that you're not doing a stellar job. Well, no, I know how it's important to be attentive. So I don't want you to get the wrong non-verbal cue.
Well, there's two things that. So I taught middle school. I also taught high school. The middle school was really special to me. And then I did stand-up comedy.
Oh, I see that.
Yeah. So there's nothing these folks can dish out to me that I never.
Oh, I just wanted to say that.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that.
What? Oh, yeah. Here, the gentleman we're speaking to on down there, board member.
Okay.
Real great lady. She's sister. Maybe half of the students at the college next door. Part of their diversity.
Yeah, it's funny.
The dark-haired guy? Okay.
So sweet.
Okay. Yep.
Director, so
Yep.
it's really sweet.
Like 3:45 or so. No, you just tell me when you're here. Yeah.
So should I hand out the
No, I will do it. We're gonna do a prayer first. Go for it. Okay. Hello, everybody. For our opening prayer here for this afternoon is going to double as a rehearsal for the song that we're going to sing at the graduation liturgy. So, as the returning faculty know, it's a tradition here at the graduation mass on Wednesday night, the 18th. The faculty sing a song to the seniors. It's a surprise. Theoretically, they don't know it's coming, but it's meant to be kind of a little gift for the seniors. This year, we're doing a new song, which is why we're having this little practice. The song is Sanctuary. Probably many of you know it. If you don't, it's very simple. Our plan is to sing it 3 times, and on the last time, the 3rd time, we'll invite the seniors to sing with us. I think many of them will know it too. Okay, so our rehearsal here today will be just like we'll do it at the Mass. We'll sing it 3 times. If you want to throw in some harmony, do it. We're going to watch you. Otherwise, I think we're good. So I'm going to stop you over here, but let's pray.
Lord, we pray to the sanctuary, pure and holy, tried and true, with thanksgiving, we are living sanctuary for you. Lord, prepare me to be a sanctuary, pure and holy, tried and true, with thanksgiving, we are living sanctuary for you. Lord, prepare me to be a sanctuary, pure and holy, tried and true, with thanksgiving, we are living sanctuary for you.
Amen. Okay, thank you. If you can pass these cards in, I'm going to collect them and then we'll get back to you on Wednesday night. Graduation. Yes.
get one of those.
Just get into that spring weather, and the sun's out, and the rain is holding off, so we're anxious to get into our evenings. We have a couple hours here to spend with our speaker, Andre Cohn. He has worked with us for 3 years so far. Today has been spent with different student groups. He spent about 2 hours and 15 minutes with the entire freshman class. And I think the kids walked away with a lot of thoughts, a lot of points to reflect on, and some action plans for them as far as adding the best that they can do in our community to themselves. And then actually we spent lunch together, which was really neat. So Andre, you got to talk to Andre kind of intimately around one of the teacher appreciation tables. Thank you, Anna, for arranging lunch for everybody today. Packing lunch is a really special day. And then at about noon to 1:15, Andre worked with a group of about 20 students that have self-identified as students of color through their color school reporting. They were invited up to their choice to choose from classes, and it was a very, very nice, intimate conversation with Andre about different things that they're living and maneuvering in their world as a minority student here at Edgewood High School in our predominantly Caucasian culture, or community, I should say. And I think those kids walked out and really like high-fiving and saying how much they love you. So you have like 20 more loves in your life, Andre. Andre came in last night from Minneapolis with his wife and soon to be 2-year-old daughter. We'll see them a little bit later. She really has a little bit of free time, so I'm anxious to be able to touch base with her and see how much she's grown since the last time Andre was able to visit us in semester 1. We have a couple of guests that have joined our community from Edgewood College, as well as some board members, which we've been working with Michelle, Bob, myself, Sister Maggie, Sharon Brolin, and then a couple others from the board who've been working as a team to talk about diversity and action through Edgewood, and kind of bridging that gap between the board and them telling our story as they go out into the greater Madison community, and helping educate them on all the different things that are going on in our institution in their classroom. So we thought this was a great opportunity that they come in and can speak to spending time with us and working with Andre. So Andre, I sent you yesterday another his resume that I found online, which is like 5 pages long. So I hope you had a chance to kind of scan down through that. It's a impressive resume. I always feel bad when we get to about the 2 o'clock hour because we've been on this phone all day, meeting the needs of our kids and answering those questions that they have. It was really cool, and but we all know how much energy that takes. So, and then here we are from 2 to 4. So he assured me that this is the part that he gets really pumped at. So, as a true educator, down inside, I've asked him to, you bring his ideas and encourage communicating about his different groups of people through his teachings to our community and to this group specifically, as well as ask for a classroom takeaway. That's always very, very important for classroom teachers. How do we take this back to a curriculum? How do we take this back to my classroom and my workings here at the high school? So I've shared that with him, and hopefully we can get that accomplished. So please give me
So, what is a basic white girl? A shopper. Does anybody know what I'm talking about when I say basic? Okay. Or Sperry's. Pumpkin spice lattes. She has a what?
A blanket scarf.
A blanket scarf, a blarf. I've never heard of a blarf. That's good though. So I teach a sophomore class at Bethel University in the Twin Cities, and on Monday's class they hipped me to a new term called the basic white girl. And I had never heard of that, but apparently in social media, it's a thing, and apparently there are people who know what that is. And so we were talking about this idea of the basic white girl in the context of stereotypes and how limiting stereotypes can be. And so as they were talking about the basic white girl, and I was listening to how they were describing it as someone who likes pumpkin spice lattes, who likes to wear yoga pants, but the coffee has to be from Starbucks, right? And so they're talking about this basic white girl, and I figured out that I am a basic white girl. I figured that out. So we talked about that, and so I want to talk a little bit, spend some time talking about the nature of stereotypes, where they come from, and why they exist. In the handout that you have in front of you is what I shared with the students of color to really try to tease out and identify some of the areas that they may have some concerns. And so one of the things that came out of the freshmen's session was that a couple of students of color came back and wanted to dialogue around this question. And the question was about reverse discrimination. And so when you hear that, or when you think about reverse discrimination, what comes up for folks that have either heard it or had to entertain it or had to talk about it? What is this concept of reverse discrimination? Has anyone heard it other than, okay, yes. Okay, so it's a belief that discrimination typically happens for minority groups, but now that it's starting to happen for a majority group, which happens to be, she said the basic white girl, but happens to be white people. Anyone? How else? Yes. I can't get into college because I'm white. Okay, so financial aid, scholarships, the whole kit and caboodle keeps me out because I'm white. If I was something else, I could get in just on that. I never get that job because I'm white. Right? So those are the kinds of things that we hear around reverse discrimination. True or untrue, factual or misinformed? What do you think? Yes, sir.
I'd say misinformed.
You would say misinformed. Why would you say misinformed?
I think you can come up with that worldview based on, kind of a feeling if you back it up with, you cherry pick information that seems to jive with what you feel.
Okay.
And you can come up with that.
Okay.
But, you have to intentionally not look at the bigger picture.
Okay, so you can cherry pick information to kind of find the definition that you want. We might call that the scientific method, but which is you ask a specific question so you get a specific answer. Is that not the scientific method? Right? Yeah. So, what other thoughts? Reverse discrimination.
Some people say it's true, but that it's justified. White majority are paying for sins of the past.
Okay, so people are paying for sins of the past. It may be happening, but it's justified because they need to pay for sins of the past. Interesting. Yes, sir.
It's kind of hard to say without seeing some data. You need numbers.
Okay, so it's hard to say without seeing data, and you need numbers.
You're going to talk about college admissions. See numbers.
Okay.
How do the numbers look? Numbers. Data is data. Not cherry pick data, but like data.
Yep, so data is data. Don't cherry pick data, but we need to see the numbers to make those differentiations. Yes, I'm sorry.
Just piggybacking off of Lee and Derek's point, I think that it's a misunderstanding because people that believe in reverse racism aren't factoring in the institutional racism that has continued based on sins of the past. So yes, we weren't directly the culprits of the sins of the past, but there have been significant historical, continuous, and ramifications to those that need to be taken into account when it comes to college admissions and all of those other, like, reverse racism.
Okay, so we need to take in consideration systemic oppression, cultural stuff, all this stuff. Okay, cool. Got it. How many of you have ever applied for a job other than this one? Or including this one, yeah, right? How many of you have not gotten one of those jobs that you've applied for? All right? So when you didn't get the job, how did they notify you that you didn't get the job? Raise your hand if you got a phone call. All right, so you got a phone call. Raise your hand if you got a letter. Raise your hand if you weren't notified at all. You just, right? All right, cool. So I want to talk to the phone call and the letter people. When you got the phone call, what did it go? What was the script? Loosely, you don't have to do it verbatim, but what loosely was the script of the phone call? Yes. So we have chosen someone else for the position, and we thank you. Other phone call people, was the script similar to that? We appreciate your interest in our company. Best wishes.
You were great. It was a tough decision.
You were great. It was a tough decision. Okay, letter people who received letters. What was the script of the letter? Okay, so we selected someone with better qualifications. Or a better match, better fit. What else? We have decided to go in a different direction. Now, do you think that letter was specifically tailored for you? No. So other people who were also probably denied got a similar letter. Would you imagine that that's probably true? Okay. I did not get the job because they gave it to someone less qualified. Have you heard someone say that? Yes, I've heard some people say that. I did not get the job because they hired a ... minority, a woman, whatever. Anyone heard that argument? Right? I want to go back to your point where we need to see the data. If you have never received a rejection letter that had that information in it, who has? Who has? So when we talk about this idea of reverse discrimination, it's a problematic way of thinking about the world. I would go as far as to say it's an excuse. Now, I can say that I am the best basketball player on the planet. I can say that. Say it all day. I can tell you what my basketball name is. You want to know what my basketball name is? On the court, they call me Priest because I cross fools. I can say that all day. Let LeBron James walk in the room. What's going to happen?
You're going to pray.
I'm going to pray, right? Right? So we go to the basketball court because I've been saying I'm the best basketball player on the planet, and one of the best basketball players on the planet walks in the room. What do I start making? It's, I put my hamstring. I don't have the right shoes. The moon and the stars aren't in alignment, so I'm not going to play my best game. I start making excuses. Why am I making excuses? Because what I was saying before LeBron showed up wasn't true. And it's really hard, particularly for our generation, the young people that we're working with, when they've been getting certificates for attendance most of their lives. Been getting awards and ribbons for soccer teams because they're on it. To meet that first rejection that says, maybe you're not as good enough. I mean, maybe you're not as good as people have been telling you. Maybe you're not. This time. And so what I worked with the freshman class on and the students of color was really talking about this idea of resilience. How do you build up resilience against a lot of these other things? And even if we look at reverse discrimination from a linguistic standpoint, discrimination can be a verb and it can be a noun. There are no such things as reverse nouns or reverse verbs. Can I unjump? Do I have a reverse jump? Is there a reverse chair? I would argue not. And so even linguistically, that is a poor setup to even have a conversation, reverse discrimination. And it also might indicate that if there is reverse discrimination, that means you're being nice to people. Because discrimination denotes being unfair and mistreating people, then reverse discrimination would mean that you're being nice to people if you follow that poor linguistic logic. So we have to call it for what it is. And one of the things that I recognize, particularly given this presidential cycle, is that there are people who really felt disenfranchised with the election of Barack Hussein Obama. And they're speaking loud and clear about their disenfranchisement. And we have to take that stuff seriously. And so although reverse discrimination doesn't exist, and it's an inaccurate and inarticulate way for people to identify themselves, I still need to listen to the feelings that are associated with that mindset if I want to be an effective leader and change agent in the world. And so for me, just to poo-poo that because it's illogical or inaccurate is not helpful. It's good for me to identify that, but I have to address those feelings because that becomes the impetus for actually helping someone to change. So I have to understand the feelings, even if the logic is faulty, right? So speaking of faulty logic, so this is not my daughter, but I am going to have a picture made of my daughter that looks like this because she could be my daughter. So I have a master's in education and educational technology with an emphasis on curriculum and instruction from the University of St. Thomas in the Twin Cities. And so I think I'm pretty with it when it comes to technology. Like I'm on top of my technology. There's not a device I don't know how to use or hook up, or except for VCRs. They still plague me with trying to program them, but those things are on the side now, so I don't have to worry about that any longer, right? And so, you know, I have my iPad and I'm doing my thing on my iPad, doing my master's level work on my iPad because I'm a master's level, you know, professional. And so I sit my iPad down to go get some Kool-Aid from the refrigerator. Yes, I still drink Kool-Aid. I've cut down on the sugar content, but Kool-Aid is still good. And so I go grab myself a cup of Kool-Aid, and my 18-month-old daughter at the time, she'll be 2 in the first week in June. So now she's in that terrible period where she's trying to make decisions for herself, but she can't, right? So anyway, so she grabs the thing and she punches in the code. She starts swiping. She hits her favorite app. And now my iPad has now become the Elmo machine. Now I thought that with my master's level, I was really doing something with this device. But it's very clear that my 18-month-old daughter can use the device as efficiently as I can. And why is that? Why is it that the 18-month-old can use the device as efficiently as I can, given the way it's been constructed. Why is that? Yes. So she watches me. So she's watched me do it and she learns how to do it. What else? What's that? She has no fear of failure. I had to learn it. She's grown up with it by watching me, right? By participating in technology. What else? What about the device? She doesn't have to read. Why doesn't she have to read? Because it's all images. It's intuitive, right? So Apple took this device and they made it, you know, as far as I'm concerned, even though I have a master's in technology, the way the iPad works is still magic. Like if they put all the parts out on the table and said, put it together and make it work, I'm not there. It's practically magic to me, right? But they made it so intuitive, so easy that my 18-month-old daughter can use it. Have you ever seen a ballet dancer? Anyone seen ballet dancers, right? And the way that, you know, they do the thing and they're just so graceful and so easy. Have you ever been to a ballet practice? I've done that. It's not easy. It's not fun either. And it's certainly not as graceful as they are on stage. But they make that stuff seem so easy. Ever seen some of those singers, right? So one of my favorite shows is The Voice. Anybody ever watch that show? You know, they turn around, right? You just make it seem so easy. Your favorite athlete, the way they flow through the air or they hit that, they make it seem easy. But it's not that easy. So when we talk about this idea of diversity, we have to recognize that there are a number of schools of thought that can convolute how we even have a conversation about diversity and inclusion in our school. And so one is this idea of white privilege versus internalized oppression, people of color internalized oppression. That can convolute some of our conversations if we don't know what all that stuff means. There's this idea of sensitivity training versus knowledge, skills, and ability. There's cultural competence versus cultural destructiveness. There are monocultural mindsets, simplicity, and ethnocentric ways of being versus intercultural mindsets, complexity, and cultural relativity. Now, I don't know about you, but all of those concepts can be really daunting to try to understand how they all relate to each other and how they connect and what the nuances are. And it's taken me at least 20 years to be able to identify a number of those strategies specifically, understand what they are and how they relate to other things. I don't know that you have 20 years to master all of this for your students. Complexity, really difficult stuff. But what makes the iPad important is that it's easy to use. And so one of the things that's missing a lot of times in our work is this idea of diversity elegance. You know why the iPad is so popular is because it's elegant. And what is elegance? Elegance is taking those complexities and making them seem simple, making them easy to use. And so when we talk about this idea of diversity elegance, what I want you to do is to peel away. I want you to understand those things as we go along, but you don't need to understand those things to be elegant and working with your students and understanding where they come from. And so I'm going to give you some tools that will help you with this diversity elegance. Does that concept make sense? Yes? No? Okay. So first, let's talk about what is the difference between these three concepts. So what is diversity? So I want you to get into groups of 4 or 5, and I want you to talk about each of these concepts. So first, we'll talk about diversity. Then we'll talk about equity and inclusion. So I want to get in groups of 4 or 5 and identify what each of those mean. What do you think each of those mean? Five, four, three, two, one. All right, so what? So in your group, feel free to share. In your group, how did you define, or what was the definition that you, or how did you talk about this idea of diversity? So what is diversity? So how did you talk about diversity? How did it get defined? What is diversity? Uniqueness and differences. Yes.
I think there's an element of representativeness to it. So if you could say like our diverse institution should represent its population. So like we say our school is diverse, our school should represent the population mass in terms of income, race, or gender, or any kind of other thing. It should be reflective.
So diversity has a piece that is either reflective or that mirrors a community or subset. Okay. Other folks. What else is diversity, or how did you talk about diversity? Yes. So diversity is not limited to race. So there's diversity of thought, political views, sexual orientation as examples. Is that correct? All right. Great, great. Diversity. All right. What about equity? How did equity get talked about, or how did you define? Yes.
We cheated.
You cheated. Okay.
I asked how the people in my group would explain equity versus equality. We were all kind of thinking on that, and then I went on Edutopia.
Yes, Edutopia is where you found it on your smartphone.
Very elegant.
Yes.
And it defined the difference as equality meaning giving everyone the same resources, and equity meaning giving each student access to the resources they need to learn and write.
All right. Equity. Other folks who didn't use Utopia.
I thought it was too good.
Edutopia. All right, it was good. It was good. No, it was fine. It wasn't cheating. How did other people talk about equity? Fairness. Equal opportunity. So this is one thing I'll share, because sometimes people do use equal opportunity and fairness as it relates to equity. Equity is not fair. Equal opportunity and fairness would be what? Equality. Equity in its nature is not fair. But it is equitable. Meaning I give everyone what they need as opposed to giving everyone the same thing. Right? Another metaphor I think Edutopia uses, or Teaching Tolerance uses, is this idea of giving everyone shoes. That is equality. But equity is giving everyone the shoes that fit them. Equity. And by its nature, it is not fair. By its nature, it's not fair. So equity. Inclusion. How did that get talked about in your groups? How'd you talk about inclusion? What is that? Anybody ever heard these words before? I mean, okay, because people toss these words around, but sometimes I don't know if they know what they're talking about when they say these things, right? Yes. It's a conscientious action. And in organizations, where do those conscientious actions come from, or how do they get demonstrated? By the adults, by those in charge, policies, mission statements, right? So I want to offer to you that these three things have a relationship. That diversity is about the law. It's about who. It's about counting differences and similarities in people. It is about the law. It's about the who. That equity is about the intent. What do I intend to do? What is my intention for this community? Do I want to make sure that everybody has equality, or equity. It's a choice. Do you have rules for your classroom? Does anyone have rules for their classroom, right? Do you have exceptions for those rules? Anyone have exceptions for those rules? Yeah. When I taught, most of my exceptions to the rules had names attached to them. Why? I could bring equality, but I wanted to have equity so that I gave students what they needed, as opposed to just bringing the hammer down. Because some of my students needed different things. Non-traditional students respond in non-traditional ways. To think otherwise makes you loopy, right? So impact. Inclusion is about impact, and it's about the what. What are we doing? What are we demonstrating? What is in our policies? What are we doing? So those three things are important, and they're relational as it pertains to protecting our students' humanity. Because all of our students are looking for safety, significance, and belonging. And when we have these three things in place, we have that sense of diversity, elegance that lets them flower and be who they can be. So how, what, and who? We've talked a little bit about this idea of, let me get to the teacher section. Of safety, significance, and belonging. And that all of our students are looking for these three things through their behaviors. Some of them off-purpose behaviors, some of them very intentional behaviors, but they're all looking for significance, belonging, and safety. Significance simply says that I'm a person with purpose and power, and I was born to do something. Something that either God told me or something that I decide for myself. But I have purpose, I have significance. Belonging says that I'm in relationships with other human beings that recognize my significance, my power, what I can do. And they support me in that. And lastly, safety simply says that I'm physically, emotionally, spiritually, and physically, emotionally, spiritually, and cognitively safe to be in relationships with people who understand my significance. So all human behavior is directed towards these three things. Think about why kids smoke. It's probably one of these three things. Why do kids join gangs? It's probably one of these three things or a combination of these things. Why do kids choose to be on the honor roll? I would imagine that it's also connected to one of these three things. Why have those immigrants moved into your neighborhood? I'd imagine that it's one of these three things. And so if we know what the motivation is, we have a pretty good handle on how to be helpful to our students. How to encourage them. And so diversity, inclusion, and equity surrounds this, and we have an environment where students can flourish and thrive with their potential. Because when those three things aren't being met, and when those external factors on that triangle of diversity and inclusion aren't happening, then we have something referred to as Han that occurs, that happens. Has anyone heard of the concept of Han? And Han basically, and I don't mean Solo. I don't mean Solo. No Star Wars people? Han comes out of the Korean tradition, where Koreans have this resentment for being a consistently conquered people. And so they have this underlying resentment. And I would suggest that racism and sexism and heteronormative behavior that becomes oppressive this becomes, becomes the residue that's hurt. Have you ever had a student in your class that, you know, for the most part was pretty mellow, but one day they just kind of exploded or they snapped at you in a particular kind of way that's uncharacteristic of themselves? Has that ever happened? Right? I would imagine that they're experiencing hurt. And so part of our job is not only to create that triangle that creates safety, and support those safety, significance, and belonging, but it is also to help to avoid this hurt. And where does this hurt come from? Where does Han come from? It comes from the disenfranchisement or the dissection of our humanity. Of our humanity. So if you would, open up your handbook, your workbook, and we'll look at page 2. So when I taught middle school, it became very important for me to make sure that I took sophisticated ways of being, sophisticated ways of talking, and really get these concepts down to the core that I needed my middle schoolers to get. And so when we talked about the human soul, we talked about it in a very particular kind of way, in a very simplistic way. And one of those ways that I talked about it was in terms of the relationship between the body and the spirit, and that there is a bridge. When you have a small child, there is not much difference between their physical condition and their spirit, because when they're hungry, what do? They cry. When they have to, use the bathroom, they do it. There's no thinking about it. The body and the spirit are one, right? They're one. But I remember when my grandmother passed, and it was very interesting to me, looking at it from an anthropological point of view, or a sociologist, using a sociologist's eye, to watch this progress, because it was a very bizarre thing that we would do. So we would buy a very expensive box for my grandmother, and typically the box was inlaid with pearls. So it had a pearl cover on it, and so you could look at it and see, rainbows and different lights in this box. And on each corner of the box, it had these eagle claws, and the box sat up on on these wheels, and so you could push the box around. And so they put my grandmother in the front of an auditorium, very much like this, in this box. And they would dress her in clothes that were unlike my grandmother's clothes. So I don't know where they got those clothes. And they also did not pick my grandmother's best wig, and she never wore her makeup like that. But they put her on display. And so they opened up the box, and people would come to look at my grandmother, and some people would just look and walk by, but other people would say stuff to my grandmother. Other people would write notes and leave them with my grandmother. And you always have that weird relative that wants to touch the body. And so we would have this thing called a viewing. So people would come and do these things with my grandmother. And as they're interacting with my grandmother, how is she responding? She's not responding. Why? Because she's not there. Without my grandmother's spirit inhabiting her body becomes a thing. So later, after that, we would go to her house, and I remember people, flipping through the photo albums, and we're laughing and telling stories about my grandmother, and some people telling lies about my grandmother, but we're having a really good time, and it almost feels like my grandmother is there. Has anyone ever experienced something like that? Right? It feels like the person is there, but they can't animate anything. So when the body is devoid of the spirit, the body becomes a thing. And when the spirit is outside of the body, it becomes less powerful or powerless. And so when we talk about this idea of Han, Han is when that separation starts to occur and we have a crack in the soul. In the 70s, there was a famous book written by Alex Haley called Roots. Does anyone remember that book? And then there was also a mini series that came on, which is an interesting term because it was on for 2 weeks or 3 weeks for 3 hours a night, but they called it a mini series. Like, I wonder what a maxi series would have been like, right? So in the opening scene of this drama, they kidnap a young man from the shores of West Africa, and they tie him to the stirrup to condition him for the economic system of slavery. And the young man, the actor in this particular scene, is a young man by the name of LeVar Burton, who's also the Reading Rainbow guy. You know, take a look, it's in a book, a reading rainbow. I can be whatever, right? So that they'd have him up, and so they have him in the stirrups, and his conditioner has this medieval, horrible-looking thing, and he lashes him on the back. Whoosh! And LeVar Burton screams a blood-curdling scream. Ah! And the conditioner says, "What is your name?" And he says, "My name is Kunta Kinte." And the conditioner lashes him and says, "No, your name is Toby." And so this continues. What is your name? My name is Kinte. So finally, both men are worn out. And the conditioner takes his last lash. And he says to the young man, "What is your name?" And the young man says, "My name is Toby." What happened? What happened? They broke his soul. They broke his soul so that now he could become what? A thing. A thing. And the interesting thing about that is if we're not careful, we will find ourselves at the same lashing post. But instead of a medieval device, they use something called commercials. How many commercials have you seen that actually made you feel good about being human? There are a few. But the majority are telling us what we're missing without their product. How we need their stuff to make us human. People with straight hair want curly hair because of the commercial. People with curly hair want straight hair because of the commercial. People who drive slow cars want fast cars. People with big cars want smart cars, which I think is funny. Smart cars are little, big cars. Right? Because of the commercial. Drink this, buy that, do this, do that. What do we know about that in terms of healing the human soul? Does that work? Can I buy enough stuff? Can I drink enough stuff to heal Han? I would argue no. And looking at the data, I would say I look at people who had everything. Philip Seymour Hoffman, success. The Academy loved him. Janis Joplin, Jimi Hendrix. Robin Williams? They didn't have enough stuff to fill their soul, to heal harm. So it's up to us to figure out how do we do that for our students. And we do that by recognizing the need for diversity, the need for inclusion, and the need for equity, so that their dignity and honor in being human is recognized through everything that we do. Questions, comments, observation up to this point? Does this make sense? Am I way out there? Am I in the way? Okay, so I'm pretty close to the edge, which is good. Which is good. So when we talk about this idea of diversity elegance, I really love this idea of the animal farm. Did anyone read that book? Is anyone reading with your class now? Or is that one of those banned books? Is it all right? What's that? Oh, okay. It gets banned, but not here. Okay. So I you said not yet. Right. So no, I love Animal Farm because I think it's very interesting. It was an interesting book. But then when I started thinking about where we are in our society, we're pretty close to an animal farm of a different sort for ourselves. Has anyone ever bought free-range chicken eggs? Anyone bought? Okay. Anybody bought free-range chickens? Right? Okay. For those of you who bought free-range chickens, are they the same price as traditionally raised chickens, or is it a different price? It's a higher price, all right? And why is it a higher price for free-range chickens? Why is that price difference? Why is it more expensive? Okay, so there's more risk on the part of the people who raise the chicken. And where are they taking this risk? Where's the risk coming from? So the chickens roam free. So they roam free. Yeah, that's a risk. They get hit by a bus. Right? They can get eaten by Wile E. Coyote. Right? What are the other risks associated that are in the price of that chicken? Financial. The cost to bring them to market is higher. Why? Because there's less of them? Okay, so there's fewer of them in the amount of space. They're roaming free. They're kicking it all night, no curfew. They exercise more, so they're not as fat. They're happier. I heard someone say this, and I thought it was really interesting, that we raise these chickens more humanely. I think that's interesting that you can raise chickens humane like a human, just because it's a chicken. They're more expensive. So why is it that the cage chicken can be done more economically? So that you can produce a lot more chickens more quickly. You can put a lot more in a smaller space. You can pump them up with food. You can treat it like a thing. What had anybody that done chicken farming or around people who've done that, right? So what else do you have to do because if they're in tight spaces, won't chickens cannibalize themselves? So what do you do to avoid them cannibalizing themselves? You what? You isolate them in their own little thing. What else? You guys are generous because my granddaddy would just cut off the beak. They remove parts. You cut off the beak. You put eyeglasses on the birds, right? But since the birds are in such close quarters, they will cannibalize. So they have chicken on chicken crime. If they're so close together, isn't there a danger that they will pass diseases from one to another? So how do they get around that? Oh, so they bring drugs into the chicken community. So it might seem that we have chickens, that the free-range chickens have privilege. And it might seem like the caged chickens don't have privilege. Could one argue that, could that be a nomenclature we could apply to these chickens? What is the fate of both chickens? Dinner. Part of the game that's been played on us, and you'll hear people talk about this idea of white privilege, or people of color not having privilege, or the dominant group versus the target group, and blah, blah, blah. And those are great things to talk about. But if we don't talk about the larger game, because either way it goes, even though I am being treated more humanely, if I'm not conscious of what else is going on, then I'm going to be served up just like anybody else. I think that is criminal. It is absolutely criminal that we let certain things go on. One of my neighbors is losing their house. Losing their house. Can't pay the mortgage. Job went away, had some problems, blah, 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 losing their house. Their house is $200,000. I saw their house for auction for $45,000. Couldn't we work with those people to keep them in their house for $45,000 than to have me buy their house for $45,000? I bought a house in a chancy neighborhood in Minneapolis. And I think I'm adequate enough at capitalism to get things done for myself. I'm not quite sure if I'm a capitalist per se. Because I found it very, so we have a challenging neighborhood, and I bought a house there because I wanted to live in that house. And I may have shared pieces of the story with folks over the years, but I bought this house because I wanted to live there. I wanted to invest in the community. And I found that I couldn't do that in the way that I wanted to. And so my wife and I decided that we said, well, let's see if we rent the house out, maybe we can get some folks in. And we found out that the market rate for renting the house is $1,650. And we said to ourselves, that's a lot of money to take from people who might be in a challenging neighborhood. So we looked at the mortgage, and if someone were to finance the home to buy, it would be $800 a month in mortgage to buy the house. So my wife and I are looking at each other. We're like, we can't take out of the community resources that could be used for it. And so we were racking our brains trying to think and trying to sell the house, and we couldn't get anybody to sell the house. We couldn't get people approved. And so what we decided was that we would sell the house ourselves as the bank. So because we're not capitalists, we sold the house for $800, allowing the people who live in the house to get a good house that they can afford in hopes that they will invest in the community. That kind of thinking is unique. And some people might say that I did not make a smart move. And you would say that if you were a capitalist. But I'm trying to get people out of this game of the animal farm as best I can. Because we have to think differently and do different things if we want different outcomes. Otherwise, we get trapped on the farm. So I talked a little bit about this concept with our young people, is this idea of liberation. And liberation is a very interesting thing because we've tried a number of different things. We've put people, we started out with people on the top and people on the bottom, and we said, you know what, that's not fair, so let's flip it. Let's try to put the people on the bottom on the top and the people on the top on the bottom, and that didn't work out so well. And so then we started saying, well, let's put us each side by side. Let's see how that works, and that hasn't worked for us. And so then we said, you know what, let's do separate but equal. You stay on your side, and we'll stay on our side, and we'll see if we can coexist. And then we said, you know what, that doesn't work, so let's just get everybody on the same side. But when does authentic, real liberation start to happen? When does it really start to happen? When it's complex? Or when it's a conflict? When it comes from the individuals? When we start comparing ourselves to an external force. See, the problem with each of those situations in that diagram is that they were constantly comparing themselves to the table. Race is an artificial construct designed by governments to govern their people. Every country has a different designation of race and ethnicity. That's not by accident. Because a Ford F-150, any place on the planet, is still a Ford F-150. But we can't say that about race. We can't say that about gender roles. They look different in different countries because they are a function of governance. Couple of things that we have to recognize is that there's no real conflict between human beings. There's no real conflict in between human beings. We want similar things, but the things that get in the way, we typically refer to as being cultural. Culture is what gets in the way. I remember the Police sang a song, I hope the Russians love their children too. And apparently, they do. What was that song about? Does anybody remember the song? Oh, Sting. I'm sorry. It was Sting. Thank you for correcting me, right? So Sting sung that song because it was about the Cold War and how he hoped that there would not be a nuclear war because the Russians loved their children. And fortunately, we haven't had that war. Yep. Oppenheimer's little toy. Oftentimes we have to talk about the problem as a problem. One of the things that really frustrates me is when people talk about poverty. When people talk about poverty, what do they talk about? What do you hear them talking about? So lack of resources, what do they talk about? Crime, symptoms, broken families, what else? Unemployment. Typically, when I hear people talk about poverty, they end up talking about the people. But they never talk about the systems that created the poverty. What's the best way to ensure a good future for yourself? This is a loaded question, particularly for us being in this particular institution. Education. Education. If we know that to be true, why do we let people have substandard education? Because maybe that's not true for all of us in the same way. Or maybe the animal farm has tricked us into thinking that we don't have to worry about those people because somebody else will worry about them. We don't have to be concerned with that because that's not our problem. But I'll tell you, All these kids are out here. They're all my children. Because I need all of them to be employed so I have a chance for Social Security. That's why I really push for them. I need Social Security, right? And we are more alike than we are different, in that our differences are illusions. We have an illusion of difference, right? Our methods are different, but they are negotiable if we understand our core values. And if it's like this, it can also be different because we create this particular situation, which means that we can create something different. And then there are laws of nature versus the laws of man. Let me go over one more concept and then we'll take a short break if you don't mind. Would you mind if we take a short break? No? Okay. So let's do that right now. Let's take a short break, 6 minutes. All right? And then we'll come back and we'll finish this. All right? Thank you.
And if they graduate from that, we have to average
Sweet. I'm going to look that up.
This was yesterday.
Oh, sweet.
Yesterday.
Let me look that up.
Yeah, I thought it was pretty awesome. What an offer for kids to succeed.
Yeah. No, that's how we make these strides. It's how we make this thing happen. It's that kind of stuff. It's unfortunate. It would be interesting to see what actually happened. Why he died like that, but it doesn't even matter. But there's nothing. There's no dirt. Right to come out. Yep, it was.
Is it time?
Almost.
Am I back? So many Americans don't think there's a
because they have everything. So there's no incentive to even think about this kind of thing. And that's our majority.
You know, and the other part is to really share with them with our constraints.
And that's why I feel like I'm here
Right,
because
right.
they need it more, but they reject it really intensely because they are protecting, and I think that's the whole capitalism aspect of it. They're protecting what they have. And I think there's an aspect of that with reverse racism is that there's a fear of losing the privilege, and that's where they're from. So they do buy into that. I can hear the tone that sort of shifted, I think, in the last 3 years or so. That the kids who do things like political correctness or, that kind of stuff, they're vocal. They're much more vocal than they used to be.
Which is why we have the kind of presidential stress we have.
Yeah, exactly.
So what we have to do is what we get is fault. Right? So in the fault, it's not so much that it's fault in the blame system, but it was incomplete. The work was incomplete.
Right.
So we're talking about political correctness. We never talk about the value of honoring someone.
So here's an example. We're talking about House on Mango Street and with Geraldo has no name, so he's an immigrant, has no name. We're talking about how tragic that is. And I get, sometimes I feel so sorry for the people who work in the inclusive club, the place that we go to in Mexico every year. And I'm like, I don't even know, like, they're serious. Like, I feel so bad for them. And sometimes I just get really, like, stumped. Like, what exactly are we dealing with here? Do you know what I mean? Yeah.
I'm going to do my best. But ultimately, we have to tell them about it. Because what will happen is they will work with the first ball.
Yeah.
So you need the shelter.
It's hard. I mean, I want to be better at handling these things and digging deeper. It's almost like I feel like I'm on the outside of the in my own classroom. Because there's so many more kids that jump on board and I'm just still kind of taken back by.
I would just go back to conversations around what does it mean. So when things are popular, does that make everybody is there? Why would people live in those kinds of situations?
Yeah.
Like, wouldn't it like to live just like these?
Yeah.
Well, why don't you?
Right.
And then start really connecting.
More time, I think. More time to do it. Thank you.
Okay. No, it's all good. I'll just do it the other way. I just wanted to get their attention. And I don't have this turned on either. So it's testing.
Yeah.
It's on.
Test. All right, let's bring this home. Let me turn it down.
No. I was made for this.
Sorry, send to the banana.
Yep, no problem. So a couple of things I want to acknowledge, and I meant to acknowledge these things before we started. I do want to acknowledge the fact that I walk into the room with a certain level of privilege. I walk into the room with privilege. I am have a master's in education. I'm probably lower middle class. I speak English as my predominant language. I'm a cisgendered male, which means that my physiology and the way I identify myself are the same. So I'm a cisgendered male. I am 6'2". I am African American. That gives me some privilege, particularly in this field. I am also attractive. I'm mildly attractive. You know, and humble. I'm also very humble. So, but I wanted to acknowledge those particular pieces because not to acknowledge them could lead me to use those things as weapons. And I do not want to use my maleness or my African Americanness or my education as weapons, but as points of references by which I speak. And so a lot of times, even with our own students, they oftentimes don't acknowledge the privileges that they have as they come into our classroom. And so part of our job is not only not to, shame them or guilt them because of the great things that their parents have done or may not have done, but to help them acknowledge that they didn't get here on their own. And that part of them being here is that they have some privileges that they did not earn. And so when we do that, we're able to really get to the core of humanity. And we want to get past, this idea of feeling pity on mission trips to different places. Because pity is not what we want. What we want is you to be a critical thinker, to think about why and how people got into those situations in that part of the world. Because once you do that, then you can start looking at the role that you play in that greater scheme of things. I went to Facebook because I was actually looking for another article, but I was surprised to see this. And we were just talking a little while ago about Chicago offering free education for students who had a B average. Is that right? Right. So 2 years of technical college. And when I was looking for an article on my Facebook feed from St. Paul College, who's offering 2 years of free education for students in our local area. I found that Detroit is also doing a thing. And so I'll do some research on why is there a surgence of these types of activities, but this certainly leads us to a place where education can truly be an opportunity that all people have access to, and quality education at that. So I was excited to see that, so I thought I'd just pull that up. That colleges around the United States are starting to have opportunities for free education. We've talked about this diagram before. I won't spend a whole lot of time on it, but this idea of respect, and respect is not something that you can earn. You can never earn respect. You have to give respect in order to earn it. When I think of particularly with the young people that we're working with, because if you speak disrespectfully to you, they will try to be respectful, but in their heart they're like, no, I'm not giving you respect. You have to earn it. And so how do you earn that? You give it in the face oftentimes of disrespect. Oftentimes we don't have those types of challenges with our young people, but I would like for us to think about that as a way of operating, particularly with folks that are different from us. How do you get their respect or their trust? You earn it. How many people will consider you an ally, or how many people will consider themselves an ally? Raise your hand if you consider yourself an ally on whatever topic, right? So that's a very interesting philosophy or paradigm, if you will, because I wonder how many operations Dr. Dre has done. Are people familiar with Dr. Dre? Right? He does music and stuff, right? Do you think he's done any operations? Probably not. Well, why has Dr. Dre not done operations? He's a different kind of doctor. What kind of doctor is he? He's a music doctor. Okay, so what university gave? What are the initials like for a music doctor? What is that? He's not a doctor. Who called Dr. Dre Dr. Dre? He did. I mean, so if you're sick, you have an appendicitis, needs to come out, and Dr. Dre comes into the operating room, what are you going to say? She was like, oh no, not you. Get me a real doctor. So how do you know a real doctor? What's a real doctor? Is medically trained. I went on YouTube. Certified by an institution. So if I call myself doctor, that doesn't make me a doctor. Until what? Until I stay at the Holiday Inn, right? Until other people, institutions say that I'm a doctor. I want you to think about your allyship. Is an ally a title you give yourself, or does someone else call you an ally? So I'm working on my allyship because I don't have enough people calling me an ally on some things. And why might somebody call me an ally on things? Because they can see my work. So I want you to think about that idea. So this idea of respect. Respect can't be earned. It has to be given. You don't call yourself an ally. Other people call you an ally because of your work. I shared this with the students of color, and we didn't get a chance to get through all the videos and all that kind of stuff. And are people familiar with the Milgram experiment? Did I show that, the Milgram experiment? No? Okay. So Stanley Milgram did an experiment, a social experiment, on what happens when people acquiesce to authority, when they don't question authority. What kinds of things can happen? So I'm going to show this video, and I'd like to talk about it. Make sure the volume is up. Oh, let's go back. Go back.
I can only use 4 for the heist, so a week after the seminar, I arranged to test the limits of their responsiveness to authority. So, a week ago, I arranged for them to take part in what they now think is a piece of unfilmed academic research at the university, and nothing to do with the show, supposedly looking into the effects of punishment on learning. and they believe now that this is part of their growth. In fact, it was a reenactment of a powerful experiment conducted by Stanley Milgram in 1963 to look at how normal people can commit atrocious acts simply because they're following orders. Milgram's parents were Jewish refugees in World War II, and his pioneering work speaks volumes about the nature of responsibility. It's being filmed with covert cameras.
Thank you. Okay.
They're introduced to an actor pretending to be another participant.
You didn't come from the same room. No. We don't actually know how punishment affects learning.
After a brief introduction, our subjects are tricked into thinking they've chosen their role as teachers in the experiment.
And you just tell me what your positions are.
No.
For a teacher. No.
Our subjects observe the learner being instructed by the scientist, who is just another actor.
This electrode is connected to a generator in the second room. We're going to the teacher.
Okay.
Just make sure that we have a good contact with the skin so it doesn't cause any restraint. Is that comfortable?
That's okay.
Yeah, and just place these straps around your ankles to avoid any excess movement. Those aren't too tight. No, that's okay. No. The teacher will read out some word pairs to you. Blue.
The learner is told he's going to be asked a series of memory questions by the teacher. He will have to word pairs and then correctly remember them when offered multiple choices.
If the answer is incorrect, you will receive an electric shock.
The teacher is then taken next door and shown the generator, which ranges from 15 volts all the way up to a lethal 450 volts. The domestic electricity supply in the UK is, of course, 240 volts. Our teachers are given the list of questions and told to increase the voltage each time the learner gets a question wrong. They are then given an example of a low voltage shock.
And try and estimate in volts the amount of shock you can get. Okay.
Oh, shit.
Do you know how much it was?
75.
It was actually 45.
Oh my God.
Shoe horn steam.
The point of this test is to see whether the teachers, our subjects, will call a stop to the experiment or continue to the point where they are administering seemingly lethal electric shocks to the victim simply because the scientist is telling them to.
That's correct. The next word is bicycle. The options: tyre, race, helmet, shorts. That's incorrect. So there'll be 120 volts. I don't want to do this anymore.
If you continue, please.
There is? No, I don't want to do anymore.
Have you found the party to continue?
Yeah, even so, I don't think I'm going to do anymore.
Correct.
According to plan, our accomplice provided many wrong answers. Each protest was coordinated to a particular shock voltage on the generator, and his responses were played via a CD.
That's wrong. 150 volts. The correct answer is Captain Shoe. Cup. That's wrong. 225 volts.
He's in a lot of pain,
Continue, please.
but he's not comfortable.
You must continue to the end of the experiment. We'll learn a lot from what gets still on to these notes.
Okay.
Forest. That's wrong. 240 volts. Are you sure it's not causing any lasting damage? He sounds like he's in a lot of pain.
Birdshot's minor painful and not harmful.
What does that mean though? They're not harmful. Sorry, I'm not getting you. When you say that they might be painful but not harmful,
It causes no long-term damage.
because what does that mean? That it doesn't leave any scars?
It causes no damage.
That seems very cold and calculated to me. This doesn't seem like a very. Anyway, golden. That's wrong, mate. 300 volts. Staple. The options diet, jar, balcony, bowl.
If the learner doesn't answer in a reasonable time, so 4 to 5 seconds, you have to treat the answer as wrong and follow that procedure.
Did you hear that, learner? Just any response, mate. Come on. Wild guess.
Please continue.
345 volts. If you're still with me, I'm sorry. I can't do this, honestly. Can we stop this experiment? Because I can't do this.
If you don't continue, we'll have to discontinue the experiment.
Yeah, okay, fine. That's fine. I'm not going to do this.
Incorrect. 405 volts. Sorry, I don't know. Someone want to check them. It says he's not making any noise now, and he was before. And I'm quite happy to go on, but I'm a bit worried about.
Should we continue?
Yeah, I'm just a bit worried because he was like he was like complaining before about the.
But no harm will come to
But
it.
he's not making any noise now.
It's essential that we continue with the experiment.
Balcony. Incorrect. 400.
Yes. Why was there a need to stop the video? You don't like watching people cause other people pain, even if it's not real. Black Lives Matter. When I was a kid, it was, and I don't even know what, I don't remember reading this, but as a young adult coming up out of childhood, there was something that my friend and I, we heard about these things called snuff films. Did anybody remember hearing about those? And what was a snuff film? What's that? Yeah, it was a movie where people actually died in the movie. And so I had older uncles, and they would sneak us into drive-in movies. And and I don't even know if it was sneaking because we were really little guys. And this is before seatbelts were like, you had bench seats in the cars and that stuff. And so they would sneak us into, and so we would see inappropriate movies. And sometimes it would be a slasher movie, right? And it's just, and you guys, anybody remember some of those Roger Corman movies, right? Just gratuitous slashing, but it was clearly fake. But sometimes it felt like it was real. And so they passed these laws or these conversations, or had these conversations about not having snuff films. Because some of them got, pretty gory. I don't know if you've seen any of Andy Warhol's movies, but some of those things are just weird, right? Like there's a Frankenstein movie where you know, he gets ingratiated by rubbing someone's intestines, like, and it was just weird stuff, right? So they made these things with the snuff films. And why do you think that they were making these snuff, saying that you can't make snuff films? Why do you think they wanted to not make snuff films? What's that? Because it's awful. It's horrible. What else is horrible? That people were watching them, watching someone die. But I think that is very interesting that I can go on YouTube right now and see black people being shot down in snuff films, and there's no outcry. Did you know that you can't find a Prince video that is officially sent by Prince on YouTube, but I can find snuff films of black bodies on YouTube? No outcry. How can one man eliminate, control the whole internet? But as a community, we can't get black bodies, deaths off YouTube. So I understand that you don't like seeing someone hurt by somebody else, but for other folks, we don't have a choice on what that looks like. So I'm sorry if this causes you harm, because this is fake. It's all fake. But all of these people in a fake situation use their privilege, their comfortability, their distance from the problem to enact harm on other people because they could not see them. So what's our responsibility for our children who are privileged? Our responsibility is to make sure that they understand that their privilege comes at a price. Sometimes that price is paid by other people, or sometimes that price will be paid by them. As much as all of our students apply to Ivy League schools, not all of them are going to get there. And we got to prepare for that. We got to tell them it wasn't reverse racism. You just didn't get it because it wasn't your time to get it. It was a luck of the draw. You didn't get it. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. That's what we prepare our students for. We have great kids, great families, great community. And we got to tell them the truth. That sometimes you win and sometimes you lose. Sometimes you're on top, sometimes you're not. Sometimes you get married, sometimes you get divorced. Sometimes you have great experiences, sometimes you don't. And we prepare them for all of those things. We prepare them for what we've gone through, which is being naked. Nobody likes being naked. Because being naked means that we're vulnerable. And what does it mean to be vulnerable? It means to be human. And sometimes our students, particularly in schools like ours, in schools like this, they get buffered by things that don't allow them to have those experiences of what it means to be human. But this little experiment, people continue to buzz and fictitiously hurt other people because they didn't have to see them. I think it's really interesting that people who can't fight will flip you off. You ever notice that? You drive and they flip you off. You can't even fight. I know you can't. If I had to pull over and we had to, you couldn't even handle it, right? Stanley Milgram was really concerned because he was trying to figure out, how do good people do evil and dastardly things? And guess how they do them? Through compliance, through silence, through being on the farm, thinking that because I'm a chicken with privileges, I'm not going to be served up. But it can happen to any of us unless we choose to operate outside of that system and empower ourselves with some real knowledge.
So
and how do we do that? We do that with these three things. This is what we teach our kids. Eros. We teach them how to love people. What does eros mean? Eros. The root word for eros is the same for erotic. So the three types of love, eros is the first, and erotic love means to ingratiate oneself. And when I have erotic love with someone else, what does that mean? I do it because it feels good. But what happens when it no longer feels good? What happens? We stop because it doesn't feel good. Philos. Brotherly love, Philadelphia. Contractual relationships. I give you $20. Why? Why do I give you $20? Because I like you? Okay, what else? It makes me feel good? No, I don't feel good just giving away money. I work hard for the money. Because I know she can give it back to me. It's a contraction. I mean, it's a contract. It's a contractual relationship. I give to her because she can give to me. Philos, brotherly love. What's the problem with philos? Yeah, it's conditional. It was so funny. During marriage counseling, our pastor asked us this question. He said, why do you love your wife? Or why do you love your husband? And people gave answers, you know, because she can cook, she looks good, he's strong, he can do this, you know, all this kind of stuff. And my pastor just shook his head. He just laughed to himself. He was like, you poor fools. And we're like, what are you talking about? He said, you should love your spouse for no reason. And that really puzzled us. We're like, what are you talking about? Love them for no reason. What happens when the reason runs out? What happens when they don't meet your reason? Philos. He said, love them for no reason. He said, agape. Love them because they exist. One of the things that you know, as we work with our students, particularly this freshman class, and you know, powers be willing, I like to see them grow. I like to grow with them. But seeing this freshman class get to a point that they do service not because they have a reason, but because it's the thing to do. It's because that's who we are. We do these things because that's who we are. Because if I'm looking for something in return, I'll always have a reason not to do a thing. But we want to encourage our students to love and act in that love because that's who we are. I think I have one more thing I wanted to just share. And that's this idea that dignity and honor are being human. Dignity is something that we can give and something that we can have. Honor is the highest form of respect, and we usually reserve that for people who've done tremendous things on our behalf that we could not do for ourselves. Being, please raise your hand if you purchased a ticket or passed a test that made you eligible to be born. None of us have done anything to bring ourselves here. We only accepted an invitation. I don't like to think about how that invitation came. It's pretty disgusting, but we all accepted an invitation, and we're trying to figure out what it means to be human. And human has two definitions. One is the noun, being a biped, having opposable thumbs, a big brain, and a belly button. If you ever encounter a person without a belly button, be concerned. It also is an adjective, and adjectives describe the noun. So how do we want to be described as human beings? We teach our young people how to be kind, how to bounce back, be resilient, how to think, how to be critical, how to love, how to bounce back from heartbreak. We teach them how to be human. I cannot teach what I do not know. So my humanity must come first before I try to teach someone else. My name is Andre Cohen. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, everybody. More to come. Keep the conversations going in with your department, and we'll talk about how we can take Andre's message and what we talked about in admin and kind of send them through the admin minutes as far as what we want you to do as far as departments and maybe take away. So thank you, everybody. Thanks, Dennis.
There's lots of information in the handout. If you ever have questions, feel free to email me. Thank you. Thank you so very much. Good to see you as well.
Great job, thank you. All day.
All righty. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. No problem.